In terms of my own work, Layla just mentioned one of the new initiatives is the founding of the Center for Advanced Virtuality. So this is a center that's for pioneering innovation with technologies of virtuality that include extended reality, virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, and more. That could include video games, social media, but more importantly than that, new forms unanticipated by any of these. And you could say, why virtuality? Why not a center for VR or extended reality? And the reason is because, one, we're interested not just in the latest particular technology, the latest headset in a way, but rather we're interested in exploring experiences that are real, but not primarily physical, as mediated by the computer. And so what that means is that if you have somebody, for instance, that is harassed online, even to the point of self-harm, tragically, you don't want to say, well, that was just virtual, that wasn't real. And if somebody also has a transformative educational experience or learned something that they can apply in their own life, you also don't want to say that that's just virtual and not real. So in other words, we think about the technologies that, you could say, paint a layer of imagination on top of the physical world. So there are 4 different functions to the center, and so I'll just briefly mention these. There's a studio, a lab, a salon, and a hub. The studio is focused on making. That's new forms of expression and innovation. The lab is focused on impact, research, that is learning, cognition, and really understanding how do we ensure that this work has made a kind of positive, empowering social impact. The salon is focused on sharing. That's capacity building events here at MIT and collaborations further afield. And the hub is focused on involvement. That is ways we can engage the community and other collaborators within our endeavors. And so now I'll say just a little bit about my own path that sort of got me to this point, and then some of the kind of works that relate to the work of this center. And so, in a way, one of my motivating ideas is this, that AI systems can impact users' behaviors, our connections, our senses of self, and even our perspectives of others. And furthermore, since biases can be embedded in technologies, it's imperative to consider their social impacts and to do this intrinsically during the act of inventing them. So how can AI be used then for social awareness and expression? Well, when I started out doing this kind of work in the areas of virtuality, people are actually interested in something like this. They're interested in creating a holodeck from Star Trek: The Next Generation. That is a kind of virtual space where you can get a narrative experience or a kind of thrill ride type experience. And no matter what you do, you get a good story. That is, you can become another person and enter a kind of narrative like Sherlock Holmes and so on. So this is well known, and it requires certain kind of technical facility, world modeling, character modeling, maybe adversarial search, so that you can ensure no matter what users do, then the world ends up creating a kind of plausible outcome. But what I thought instead was, could we do something a bit different? That is, could we use AI in an improvisational sense to automatically change stories in the sense of characters' perspectives? Or what about the cultural worldview? Or themes? Or metaphors? Or emotional tone? And to me, that required a kind of engagement with cognitive science, so kind of theories of metaphor and how we generate new ideas, new imaginative constructs. And then furthermore, how do we formalize those in a way that can yield generative computational systems? And so I'll just mention a couple of works. So actually we've done a lot of different projects over the years, but in terms of the ones that I'll mention today, I'll start with this one, which is called the Living Liberia Fabric. And so this is a system that was initiated in affiliation with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Liberia after 14 years of civil war. And the challenge is, unlike the more famous Truth and Reconciliation Commission that came out of South Africa, in which you could just point to apartheid and say that, okay, well, this was in some sense the spark for the social ill, or you could say the shroud of the social ill that we want to expose and move beyond. In this case, there are 15 different ethno-linguistic groups, a series of one-upsmanship, and also it was put in motion by collusion between slaveholders within the United States, as well as repatriated African Americans that became the elite group within Liberia. So we needed to think, how can we tell this story in a way that respects the multiplicity of the trauma that took place? So we used a platform I created, which is called Griot, which is a kind of AI platform to help generate flexible stories that are different in terms of theme and content upon each execution. And so I won't go into the details here. I mean, it's written up in a number of papers, but basically there's a kind of semantic annotation that takes place. And by analogy, you find the next best clip to fit the stakeholder group and the theme that was chosen by the user. And so just to give you a little sense, and so I can't do justice to it with the time here, but just a sense of what this looks like. It's a kind of batik fabric. I mean, these were produced in Indonesia, but famously popular within West Africa. Also like a lapa fabric on which people would typically sew images into patterns, even of their favorite politician and so on, during rallies and similar kind of phenomena. And in this case, we created this kind of work after about a year of fieldwork engaging diaspora Liberians, Peace Museum experts, and commissioners, and so on. So it starts off with this ocean sound, and all the content, text is generated, kind of poetic text, and you choose a stakeholder group at the beginning. Based on that stakeholder group, it'll put into motion the clip. So we chose here the stakeholder group of women engaged in survivance after the conflict.
And I'm recommending that we please have in Liberia TB and leprosy center all over in the Republic of Liberia. That is, one, we should have the testers at the various hospitals and clinics, because in Liberia, at the early stage, you never know that you are leper or you're a TB patient. But once you go at the hospital, while doing your polio test, yes, you do your AIDS test, yes, you do your TB test, and you do your leprosy test. It will prevent the various diseases from killing our people.
Now, all that footage was collected in the field in a kiosk using a system with agent to help people who weren't, facilitate people who weren't necessarily print or computationally literate, but of course literate in many other kind of ways in telling the stories.
That first part of my life was angry with the perpetrators, which meant these ex-child soldiers. When I started working with them, I realized that these young people are as much victim as I am.
And so as she spoke about the child soldiers, we have another set of potential clips here, and as it goes forward, then it picks up a kind of message, picking up the theme of what she just discussed, which is what the analogy finding algorithm is. So I'll stop here with just that work. We could engage it more if you like, and just move on to another system, which is using another platform of our design. This is called Grayscale, that addresses sexism in the workplace. And it addresses a particular model using a different kind of immersive system. It's an epistolary narrative. These are narratives like that take place over journal entries or some series of kind of texts, in this case, emails. And it makes you feel like you're an HR manager in the face of, in a kind of melancholy gray corporate environment. We have a model on the back end that's using our system called Chimeria that models membership in different groups, in this case, different types of sexism. And then you have to choose how you respond to these kind of incidents, such as here, I mean, this is just one, but Rob has written to the company list. Our company has a dress code for a reason. Yoga pants are A, unprofessional, and B, distracting. Right, so what do you do in the face of a series of messages that are, I mean, this is just one. We're actually, let's say a little bit about the underlying model. So do you then say something like it is not your policy, not your responsibility to police others' clothing? Or do you say something about the fact that these are being called distracting is what in fact is the issue here? And so you have a series of different kind of responses that are aligned with different types of sexism So this is implementing a social science model of sexism that includes both the kind of overt hostile sexism as well as complementary gender differentiation. That is like, well, you must be good at the kind of people skills, this kind of these kind of issues, or protective paternalism, and so on. And the system is tracking the trajectory of your sexist or non-sexist responses and generating a host of different kind of eventualities. Then the one I'll conclude on is a system that some might have heard about because this was on display at the MIT Museum, has been shown in Tel Aviv and France and many other places. And this is a system, the director actually was a visiting artist through CAST, and I wrote a grant to bring him here. He was also in my lab, the Imagination Computation Expression Lab, and CAST was very generous in terms of supporting this collaboration. So this is a work that puts you into conversation in a room that's about as big as the front of this auditorium, like a hotel ballroom, but you're in a VR space. You have combatants on either side of the room, and those combatants end up responding to your body language. This is the part that I worked on, your nervousness, bias, and so on, and changing the story and staging, lighting, and even at the end, you look like the combatant that you were least comfortable with as you went through the experience. And so you have a sense of what the space looks like. Has 3 different conflicts, has gangs in El Salvador, conflict in East Congo, and Gaza. And you always get the one that you are least familiar with at the very end, based on kind of pre-registration. And so I'll wrap up just with a brief trailer, just to give you a sense of the work, and then we'll have our next panelists. Wow.
Get too close to really phenomenal.
The Enemy was born out of my frustration as a photojournalist and war correspondent. For almost 20 years, I have photographed conflicts and witnessed the consequences of huge geopolitical shifts. When I became a father, I simply knew I could not keep working on the front lines. Yet, I was not done trying to understand wars. My friends in Israel, when they know I'm heading for Gaza, can't help themselves but to wish me luck and to stay safe. They believe a lot of people in Gaza are irrational. Also, when I spend weeks working in Gaza and I'm about to return to Israel, my Palestinian friends are telling me the exact same thing. Be careful there. The project is rooted in my experience as a war photographer, going from one side of the front line to the other, and finding that the fighters' dreams, hopes, and nightmares are often more similar than they are different. So there is a bigger story than the war itself, and this is the one I want to explore and share. For The Enemy, I am using the latest technologies in virtual and augmented realities, so you can engage directly with the combatants and meet them, hear them, and feel them the way I did. In many parts of our world, you create an enemy as a kid without having met your enemy, because the society around you has created an enemy in the other. So the question is, could I be you if I was on the other side?
So just as I started, then we could conclude just thinking how AI systems impact users' behaviors, connections, senses of self, perspectives of others. We've had a few examples of this now. And then since biases can be embedded in technologies, it's imperative to consider and design for their social impacts. Thank you very much.